Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and I was going to take a summer break from the live streams, but seems events have taken over a bit. Well, it's the morning of Wednesday, 25th of July, 2018, and I'm up in the foothills of the Pennines above Manchester. Probably can't see behind me, but you can just make out the buildings of Manchester city centre in the background there. And I came up to check out the Greenridge Reservoir here, but it's running a bit low. But unfortunately, there's no signal down in the valley, so I'm back up on the hilltop here. Well, yesterday, and I'm sure pretty much everyone watching this is already aware, but yesterday, Greg Clark bottled it and appointed Claire Perry, his deputy, as the person who should sign off on Quadrilla's application to FRAC. So the responsibility lies with the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and that is Greg Clark. So whilst he may have delegated the responsibility to Claire Perry, who is really just a sock puppet, he cannot delegate the accountability. So the bottom line is that when all this goes seriously wrong, as it will, then Greg Clark, it is your responsibility. So Claire Perry's name was on all the announcements yesterday, and she has taken great delight in announcing, of course, on the day before Parliament basically goes into summer recess, so that they're not going to get any grief in the House, and they're hoping that by the time they all come back from summer recess, it'll be done and forgotten. Well, sorry, Claire and Greg, I don't think that's going to happen. But yesterday perhaps you thought it was a good day to bury bad news with everything that was going on with Brexit and Theresa May snubbing Dominic Raab. But as far as the anti-fracking community are concerned, then obviously you are right in the firing line here. So Claire Perry, Greg Clark, one and the same. You have taken a decision based on the lobbying of the oil and gas industry to initiate a process that literally is like holding a loaded gun at the head of every man, woman and child across the north of England. And you've granted that permission to a cowboy outfit, i.e. Quadrilla, whose track record is somewhat less than exemplary, to put it mildly. Quadrilla is some 18 employees. They do not have specialists. They rely on being able to hire in specialists. And if, as it looks like, Baker Hughes have the contract for the fracking in the UK, then it's a company that has no experience of doing this type of operation in the UK. So unless they're going to be flying specialists in from the US, then once again, we've got people who are doing this who have only ever effectively done it, in a training environment. So, needless to say, obviously, there's a lot of people in the northwest of England that are pretty frustrated and pretty upset because not only have you chosen to grant permission to frack, you've done it at a time when this entire region is on the cusp of a hosepipe ban. Now, the northwest of England, which apparently gets the most significant rainfall in the UK, particularly, of course, in the Lake District, some 400 odd inches a year. But it's an area that is totally reliant on reservoirs because the geology around this part of the country isn't the provider of aquifers, not in the same way as the other side, the Pennines. So it's very much reliant on its reservoirs, which are running low already. So United Utilities, who have basically paid their shareholders something like about £1 billion over the past 4 or 5 years or so. And of course, paying their management and chief executive outrageous salaries and bonuses. And yet they're losing in excess, I think it's something like 400 million litres a day or something stupid, some stupid number anyway. And, why is that? Because they would rather pay dividends than they would to shareholders than they would actually repair the infrastructure. So if ever there was a case for nationalising utilities, then United Utilities is that case. And, I'm certainly no lover of a socialist state. But I am absolutely an ardent capitalist. That's a genuine capitalist, not the corporatism, not the rampant corporatism that we witness today. This isn't capitalism by any stretch of the imagination. Pure capitalism has a social conscience, and we certainly are witnessing a situation where the corporations do not have a social conscience. It's about greed, and more fracking greed. So United Utilities are also contracted to provide the water to Quadrilla for their frack. So as we witnessed in the Manchester civil courts 2 weeks ago, when Judge Pelling stated categorically that the reason for any protest, i.e. the fact that people are concerned about the impact of fracking on the ecology, on the environment, and certainly on the health, is an irrelevance. Because in the UK, corporatocracy has supremacy over the resident. So if somebody wants to make money and you get sick because of them making that money, that's okay. Because the corporatist state considers that to be simply collateral. And so what you witnessed yesterday is a government, and obviously it's primarily a government of MPs who are based in the south, and Claire Perry is the MP for Devizes. And of course, Claire Perry admitted that basically when she took on this role, she knew nothing about oil and gas. Well, she still knows nothing, because she has literally been shown a few cartoons and, given the pep talk by the industry, and now think she's sufficiently an expert to be able to sign off on Quadrilla's application to frack. Well, Claire, Greg, your boss, has hung you out to dry. But of course, he's also hung himself out to dry, because there's no way he is going to get off with this. So yesterday we saw a challenge. There was a six-person lock-on at Preston New Road. Quadrilla have said, yes, we're going to pursue them through the civil courts. Well, we'll see if that actually happens. But it shouldn't be any real surprise if people now take the stance that actually the only thing they have left is civil disobedience, because they have tried every possible avenue to get basically the government, who have of course overruled the Lancashire County Council, to get the government to look at all of the evidence that is in the public domain, or even just a fraction of the evidence that's in the public domain, because anybody doing any kind of cursory research into this industry would realize that this is not a good idea, particularly in a densely populated country like this. Bear in mind that, Preston New Road is just the first of potentially thousands of fracked well sites across the north of England. So basically, if you live in the north of England, your government has done this to you, because they have demonstrated beyond any shadow of doubt that you in the desolate north, because it doesn't matter whether it's east or west, you in the desolate north are an expendable commodity. You have the misfortune to live in a sacrifice zone, But commerce is far more important than your health or the health of your children or future generations. And if we happen to turn the North into a wasteland, well, that's just unfortunate because a few people stand to make a lot of money, and that is what takes absolute priority. So if you haven't got it yet, then maybe events of the last sort of 48 hours or so will help you catch that. And then just to add insult to injury, Ben Dean, who did an absolutely sterling job as my Mackenzie friend, both in the challenge to Quadrilla's injunction and the application for the protest pen last year, and also along with his wife, Sharon, did an amazing job, a few weeks ago when we challenged the Quadrilla injunction over here in the Manchester civil courts. But now Ben has finally got a response from the Information Commissioner regarding his Freedom of Information requests to Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service. And Ben got pretty frustrated. So in the end, he was asking pretty straightforward questions like, is there a plan, is there a strategy to deal with hydrocarbon releases, unplanned hydrocarbon releases from the Preston New Road well site, and particularly hydrogen sulfide, H2S. And initially, he just got a 15-page response, which was just loaded with obfuscation. But on appeal to the Information Commissioner demanded a response from Lancashire Fire and Rescue. And basically they said, in response to his yes or no question, is there a strategy to deal with an unplanned hydrocarbon release? The answer is no. But they actually went on to say that actually it's worse than that. Because not only is there no strategy to deal with an unplanned hydrocarbon release, there's actually no strategy to deal with any kind of emergency whatsoever. And as for the Lancashire Emergency Response Forum, the Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service basically said, well, it's not a legally constituted body. And it alluded to the observation that effectively it's not really fit for purpose. And then in response to the question regarding the potential need to evacuate the 3,000 or so school children from the schools in the Kirkham area in the event of an unexpected hydrocarbon release or a blowout, Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service said, well, that's actually up to the schools. It's the schools. It's up to them to decide whether or not they need an evacuation plan. So, what we've got here is crass incompetence at every level. Because obviously Quadrilla are trying to pretend that there's no risk whatsoever. The government are trying to pretend that there's no risk whatsoever. The Lancashire Fire and Rescue Services are basically saying nothing to do with us. It's up to them to take any kind of initiative. And so, we're going to go round and round in circles. So what is it going to take? Well, it looks like it's going to take a major disaster. And of course, Quadrilla and the government are arrogant enough to say, no, it's not going to happen here. We have robust regulatory controls in the UK. Can't tell you what they are because, but just take our word for it, because we have robust regulatory controls, which I'm sure that everybody now appreciates is complete horse crap. Because the reality is that there aren't any specific regulations or controls for the process of unconventional hydrocarbon exploitation. The only regulations that we have in the UK are effectively designed around the offshore industry. And most of those came into force after the Piper Alpha disaster, which was almost exactly 30 years ago. The likelihood of something going seriously wrong with the unconventional hydrocarbon exploitation process on land in the UK is very, very high. You only have to look at the US, and on a recent episode of Fracking Nightmare with Helen Chunso, We looked at the Powhatan Point blowout, which occurred in February of this year, which took 3 weeks to deal with. And another document that I have shared on an previous episode of Fracking Nightmare, and I'll link again under this video later today, is of the analysis of the response to a blowout in Pennsylvania a couple of years ago. And what you'll see is that the test for gases went way beyond just hydrogen sulfide. There's some 30 odd gases that they set up monitors to test for. And these are the gases that are part of the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds that leach into the atmosphere in a blowout type event. So, you know, the reality is that the people of the Fylde, you have been well and truly sacrificed. Your government doesn't care about you. Your MPs just waffle. They know basically that they are going to get re-elected. I mean, Mark Menzies is in one of the safest Tory seats in the country. And of course, you know, a few years ago, there was a lot of discussion about getting social license. There's no pretense about that whatsoever now. They know fine well that no community in this country is ever going to give a free rein to the unconventional gas industry. But the attitude now is, you know what? Actually, there's a few people who object. There's a few people who protest, but it's not enough. And, you know, we can just do this. And, you know, within a few years, provided we don't have any major incidents, touch wood, because there's no plans in place to deal with one, but provided we don't have any major incidents, then it'll all be forgotten. So, you know, the ball is now very much in the court of the local community. Your government expects you to do nothing, to just sit back and say, oh, well, we tried, what a shame, never mind, and just get on. And you'll do that until such time as, you know, you're waking up and you got nosebleeds to deal with, or, you know, you're finding that there's nausea in the household, or, you know, suffering from unexplained insomnia. You know, and of course the industry will say, oh, nothing to do with us. No, it's just a pure coincidence. Well, it's not a great day by any stretch of the imagination, but consider the possibility that there are elements within the Tory government that really do want shot of this industry. They need fracking right now like they need a hole in the head, but they're too far in to be able to pull the rug. So just maybe what they're trying to do is throw a stick of dynamite under the Fylde community and say, my God, you know, what have we got to do to get you to wake up? Because, you know, we're shafting you every which way and you are just rolling over. And there are other elements saying, see, we told you, they are so dumbed down, they are so much in debt that they will ignore this risk and they will just bury their heads and just go about their daily lives. And if we can get through the next 3 months, then it'll be fine. And then we can just go ahead and continue with the plan to frack right across the north of England. Well, from this point forward, basically, it's entirely up to each and every one of us. There will be people who just move away from the area. There will be people who can afford to just walk away from their house. Because the bottom line is that nobody in their right mind is going to buy a property in an area that is targeted for fracking. And if they do, then they'll be buying it out of sheer ignorance. They'll be buying it because the prospect to fracking in the area hasn't been shared with them. And then ultimately they may have some recourse with the seller because the information wasn't provided in the disclosures. It's the summer. Your government is hoping that you're just going to go away on holiday, have a nice break with the family, and then come back and forget that you have been shafted. I think there's a few people who might have other ideas. And in the south of England, of course, you know, you've got the earthquakes there. What is it, 10 now? 10 earthquakes in and around Newdigate, 2 miles from Horse Hill and about the same from Brockham. And the oil and gas industry is saying, oh, nothing to do with us. And yesterday, Professor Peter Stiles gave a presentation to the APPG, the parliamentary group, looking at shale gas, and he had them spellbound with his presentation about the risks of fracking in the heavily mined areas of the north of England. And it was evident, apparently, from some of the comments that some of the industry people present made, that they basically are working blind. They are ignorant. They are choosing not to look at information that they could access if they made an effort from the Coal Authority. But they'd rather not know. And then when they trigger a significant seismic event through fracking in or beneath a former mining area, they go, oh dear, what a shame, never mind. Oh well, lessons have been learned. Well, lessons were certainly learned by Jack McFarlane yesterday in the York Magistrates Court, because in April of 2017, as an employee of Third Energy, he deliberately drove into a protector who was riding a push bike. And yesterday, Jack McFarland got 6 points on his driving licence for dangerous driving, fined £500 and £350 in costs. I'm sure that if it had been the other way around and it had been a protector driving into an employee of an unconventional gas company, it would have probably been a somewhat stiffer penalty. But hey, at the end of the day, it was a result. So I'm not planning on doing too many live streams through the summer because I'd like to enjoy a few weeks just doing something different. But every now and again, I might pop back with a live stream. But meanwhile, if you're watching this, it really is important that we do give some thought as to how we, as a nation, are going to respond to a socio-psychopathic, corporatist government that is in the pockets of the corporate entities who really don't give a flying frack about you or your family or your well-being or the future of the environment or the ecology of the area where you have the misfortune to live. So we're getting skyfracked today over here as well. So somebody obviously thinks that it needs to be a little cooler, and so we've got a lot of unnatural cloud above this area today. Wow, we are not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, but thanks for joining me today, and I will see you. And if you get an opportunity to come visit either at Preston New Road or at Tinker Lane or Misson Springs, then you will be made very welcome. So come and meet the people who are on the front line in trying to prevent this abomination from taking place in the UK. You have a great day.